Get comfortable, maybe dim the lights a little and just listen. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true stories where ordinary days turned unsettling. Pay attention, because you never know who or what might be watching. My living room windows faced the small, unfenced parking lot. I stayed up late almost every night. TV, games, whatever. It was winter when I moved in, so the blinds stayed closed to keep the cold out. When summer came, I had no AC, so I opened the blinds and windows at night to cool down the apartment. One night, I was lying on the couch watching TV when I suddenly felt watched. You know that instinctive prickling sensation? I looked over at the window. A man had his hands and face pressed against the screen, just 3 feet away from me, staring directly at me. I screamed. A full, panicked, blood-curdling scream. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move. I scrambled up, grabbed my phone, and screamed that I was calling the cops. Nothing. He just stood there with that dead, blank stare. When I yelled that I was getting the neighbor, he finally bolted. I locked the window, stayed up all night, terrified. My boyfriend at the time came over and stayed for a week. He kept the blinds open on purpose so the guy would see I wasn't alone. He sat closest to the window every night. The guy didn't come back for a while. Eventually, I convinced myself it was a one-off creep wandering around. 3 weeks later, I got home late from work. I changed clothes, grabbed a snack, and went to open the blinds for cool air. As soon as I lifted them, he was there again, face pressed against the screen. He hadn't been in the parking lot when I pulled in. I had parked right next to the window. That means he was waiting around a corner, watching me come home, waiting for the exact moment I approached the window. This time I immediately called the cops. Shaking, crying, barely coherent. He ran. The police said they'd patrol the block. My boyfriend rushed over and insisted on staying with me until I moved out. I started looking for a new apartment immediately. Somewhere higher up, somewhere with security. 3 weeks later, I had a new place lined up. My boyfriend had to go out of town for a few days, so I stayed with a friend. After 2 nights, I needed to stop by my apartment to grab some things. We went together during the day. Since it was daylight, I felt safe enough to lift the blinds for some air. I hesitated, then opened them. No one there. I even laughed at myself. Then I opened the actual window. 2 large holes had been cut into the screen. Clean, deliberate holes, right above the latches. They were not there 2 days ago. My blood ran cold. He knew my boyfriend was gone. He saw his car disappear. He saw mine still parked. Saw the living room light we left on to make it look like someone was awake. He thought I was alone. He thought I was home. And he tried to break in. I don't know if he ever got inside. But the escalation, the boldness, terrified me. How long had he been watching? Studying my routines? Getting braver? To this day, I still tense up when I raise window blinds. Thanks for the lifelong PTSD, creeper. When I was in elementary school, 3rd or 4th grade, my mom overslept one morning. That meant I overslept too. Normally I caught the bus at 7 a.m., but by the time I sat down for breakfast, it was already 6:50. No way I'd be ready in time. Mom decided to wave the bus on and drive me to school herself. As I sat eating breakfast in my pajamas, a bus pulled up about 10 minutes earlier than usual. Mom poked her head out the front door into the fog and waved it on, but the bus didn't leave. Instead, there was a knock at the door. A man in a bus driver uniform stood there. He said he was the substitute driver because the regular one had called in sick. He explained he was a bit early since he didn't know the route well. Mom told him she was taking me to school today. He insisted he could wait a few minutes. She told him I wouldn't be ready. He grew visibly frustrated but eventually left. I went back to eating breakfast. At exactly 7 a.m., another bus pulled up. Mom went outside and came back in pale and shaken. She quietly told me to finish getting ready. Years later, she told me what happened. The second bus was our real bus, full of all the neighborhood kids, driven by our actual driver. He said he had never called in sick. He had no idea who the substitute was, and no one was assigned to cover his route. The first bus was empty. He immediately called dispatch, telling them someone was impersonating a school bus driver. Mom called the police. We never heard anything else about it. Not whether they caught him, not whether he tried elsewhere, nothing. But one thing was clear. If I had gotten on that first bus, I would not have made it to school. And if Mom hadn't overslept that morning, I would have been on it. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 19 and my foster sister Kira was 16. For context, I was still female presenting at the time and hadn't come out as trans yet. It was the summer before college and I mostly lived with my mom and Kira, except every other weekend when I stayed with my dad. Summers where we lived were brutally hot and humid, so we always walked the dogs around 6 or 7 p.m. when it was cooler but still light out. On this particular evening, Mom wasn't going to be home until late. Choir, Bible study, youth group, she was always busy. So it was just me and Kira, and if we didn't take the dogs out, our younger dog Samson would explode from pent-up energy. Even though we lived in the countryside, we decided to drive 20 minutes to a park instead of walking our usual roads. I don't remember why. Maybe we were bored. Maybe we were avoiding hills or blind curves. Either way, around 7:30 p.m., we loaded the dogs into the car and headed to the park. Before I go on, here's the layout. The park has one long, mile-wide loop road. Cars can only drive one way. The inside of the loop has the playground, pond, and a small country hall. The outside of the loop is mostly grass and trees. If two people walk in opposite directions, you'll pass each other twice. If you walk the same direction, you rarely cross paths. We parked, leashed the dogs, and started our walk. Everything was normal. I stopped occasionally to take pictures, mostly of Kira trying to wrangle Samson, who pulled like his life depended on it. That's when we saw him the first time. A man in his 40s walked past us, going the same direction as us, toward the playground on the outer side. He smiled, nodded, said hello or cute dogs. Something harmless, totally normal. People around here are friendly. 10 minutes later, he passed us again. But this time, he appeared from the opposite direction, cutting directly in front of us so closely that Kira had to stop to avoid bumping into him. That was strange. The only way he could have done that was by cutting across the inside of the loop, because it wasn't possible to catch us from behind and get in front of us that quickly if he stayed on the road. We exchanged the "did that really just happen?" look, but brushed it off. Maybe he was just wandering. 5 minutes after that, he passed us a third time. This time, he came up behind us, crossed the street in a weird diagonal path, and cut us off again, just inches from brushing Kira's shoulder. He smiled, said hello, kept walking. That was when the alarm bells finally hit. 3 passes, wrong locations, wrong timing, wrong directions. None of it matched normal foot traffic. I told Kira we needed to leave now. We sped up and headed toward the car. That's when we noticed a car creeping behind us. We stepped aside to let it pass. Yet it stopped too. When we walked, it crawled behind us. When we stopped, it stopped. Kira got visibly nervous. We hadn't seen the guy since the last cutoff, so part of me wondered if I'd overreacted. But here was this tinted car behaving strangely. Another vehicle finally pulled up behind it, and the creeping car drove off slowly. We got to our car fast, practically tossed the dogs inside, and left. My mistake? I didn't check the rearview mirror. I drove straight home. I was more focused on getting somewhere safe. We got home around 8-something. The sun had dipped low. Everything was that dusty purple before full darkness. Mom still wasn't home, so we fed the dogs, locked the doors, ate dinner, and relaxed in the living room. And then it happened. Around 9:30, the ceiling above Kira briefly lit up, headlights sweeping across it. That usually meant Mom had arrived, since our long driveway curves in a way that always casts that light pattern. But the light didn't complete the usual arc of someone pulling up all the way. We ignored that. A minute later, the porch motion sensor flicked on. I could only see a thin sliver of the porch from where I sat. The light turned off. Then the storm door creaked open. But we heard no keypad beeps. Nobody tried the handle. The second that creak hit the air, both of our dogs exploded deep, furious barking. Calvin, our golden greyhound mix, has a terrifying bark. Samson whipped himself onto his hind legs, scrambling at the tall window in the door, trying to see out. Then the storm door slammed shut. Heavy footsteps pounded across the porch. I froze. Completely. Limbs like lead. My brain emptied out. Fight, flight, or freeze. And I am a freezer. Not Kira, though. She spun around, tried to look out the window. Then, because the porch light didn't show anything, grabbed a dog toy, a tug rope with a ball on the end, and opened the door. I told her to shut it. She ignored me and walked out. She came back in after a moment, only to grab a kitchen knife and go back outside again. This time, she was gone for several seconds. When she returned, she slammed the door, breathless, and said she saw the silhouette of a man standing near our old, unused dog kennel. When he noticed her, he moved. I called Mom, hand shaking, limbs barely responding. Mom talked me through locking the basement door, checking windows, bringing the dogs in. I sent Kira instead of going myself. I simply couldn't get my legs to work. Mom came home, checked around, found nothing. We called the non-emergency police line anyway. 2 officers came, looked around, and found nothing. They were polite, but clearly thought we were just 2 scared teenage girls. Before leaving, they told us that if someone's acting suspicious or following us, don't go straight home. To this day, only Kira and I believe someone with malicious intent came to our house that night. Maybe it was the man from the park. Maybe it wasn't. But the timing, the repeated passes, the creeping car, the headlights, the motion sensor, the storm door, the footsteps, Kira seeing someone, the dogs, reaction, too much lined up. If that was him, maybe he cut closely in front of us earlier to see how the dogs reacted, testing whether they were a threat. I don't know. What I do know is this. If someone is taking too much interest in you, walking by too often, cutting in front of you, following you, trust your gut. Don't go straight home. Stay in public. Pay attention. You never know who's watching. Thanks for listening. If this story gave you chills, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Stay aware out there. You never know who's watching.